Okay, hi everybody, it's Sam. If I start sneezing, I'm sorry. On and off all month, I've been sick. Like, I get sick and then I get better. I get sick and then I get better. I mean, it's just this past month. I think it's like either maybe my sinuses or allergies, or I don't know. Maybe I might be coming down with a head cold for all I know. Just all of a sudden, I just start sneezing. So if I start sneezing, sorry. But I'm going to read. I'm sorry I didn't get to do it yesterday, but I couldn't get my hands on the laptop to do it. So I'm going to read chapter 13 in Twilight Hunger. I might read another chapter just to try to, for yesterday. Chapter 13. A soft hand fell on Morgan's shoulder as she sat there on the beach sobbing. "Why do you cry?" It's a woman's voice, deep and rich, slightly accented. Morgan lifted her head and swiped her hand across her cheeks. She could barely see the woman who walked up beside her. She was tall, slender, blur, dark hair, cranberry-colored coat. Oh, God, you must think I'm an idiot. No, I too had a very strong reaction to the film, not as strong as yours, however. She sat down in the sand beside Morgan. You were at the theater? I saw you run off, weeping, and I was concerned. Finally, Morgan cleared her eyes enough to look at the woman who was sitting beside her on the sand. Her wine-colored trench coat reached to her ankles and was buttoned all the way down. Long black boots on her feet, hugging her calves. Her hands were gloved in matching black leather, and her face was partly hidden by exquisite masses of black curls. She wore a lot of makeup, way more than Morgan would have usually find tasteful, and yet she had the presence to pull it off. She stared at whoever this was, not looking Morgan directly in the eyes. What made you run from the theater that way? Lowering her head, Morgan shook it slowly. The woman didn't seem to know who she was, and she preferred to keep it that way. Her sunglasses and headscarf remained in place, and she was grateful for them. The story seems very real to me, she said softly. I've seen it play out a dozen times, more than that in her mind, and every time I've have the same reaction when his family rejects him that way, sending him out into the world of darkness all on his own. I guess it just hits me on some level. Me too. I was treated much the same way by my family. She turned now and seemed able to lock on to Morgan's eyes right through the sunglasses. You also, I would guess. Yes, she spoke without meaning to, as if the words were drawn out of her. The woman had stunning eyes, dark maybe, black, and somehow luminous. The sun had long since set, and the waves lapped gently at the shore beneath a star-dotted night sky. Tell me, the woman said, her voice soft and low, compelling. I was never close to my parents. It was only after they died that I learned I was adopted. Ah, she said on a breath. Poor thing. And you wonder then about your real family, your blood. As she spoke, she reached out a hand, gently moving Morgan's long hair off her shoulders, letting it fall down her back. Her eyes slid over Morgan's chin, touching her throat, and the skin there heated as if touched were a physical one. Yes, Morgan said. I do wonder about them, what they were like. Perhaps the history of yours is why you feel such empathy with Dante, the vampire in the film. Or maybe it's just that I live in his house. The woman started, her eyes widening slightly and jerking up to Morgan's again. The spell of her quiet voice was broken. It was sharper now. Whatever do you mean by that, child? What was she thinking? God, a slip like that could annihilate her budding career. She could never admit that the character in her film had been someone else's creation, much less that she lived in the home that had once been his. If she did, the rest would come out too. That she plagiarized his mad ramblings to create her award-nominated work. She tried a false smile, shaking her head in self-description. The house in one of the films reminded me a lot of my own, that's all. Oh, She had the distinct feeling the woman didn't believe her. Getting to her feet, brushing the sand from her clothes, turning her back to the woman as she did so. "I should go, it's getting late," and she turned back again. But there was no woman there. Morgan blinked rapidly, searching the beach in the one direction, then in the other. Scanning the water in the distance, back toward town, nothing, no one. My God, had she imagined a dark woman? She pressed a hand to her forehead, closed her eyes. "Maybe I need to get away from here for a while, just for a while." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't possible. She couldn't leave. It was no longer a matter of simple not wanting to. The moment the words left her lips, she felt sick inside, a sense of panic stirring at the mere thought of leaving him. "What the hell did you think you were doing with that girl, Seraphina?" Dante demanded. And his touch was harsh. Oh, his tone was harsh. Too harsh, perhaps, as it caused Seraphina's perfectly arched eyebrows to lift in question. "Then you know her, What is she to you?" "Nothing," he snapped his answer without looking at her. "Least she see too much." "What are you even doing here? I couldn't believe it when I sensed your presence in that theater." Seraphina shrugged innocently, though he knew too well there wasn't an innocent bone in her body. She gave her head a shake, taunting the wind with her raucous hair. "I came to see you. I couldn't help but feel you in the theater, and I passed through town, so I went inside. Imagine my surprise when I saw our history being played out on the screen." He closed his eyes, unable to reply to that. He had been shocked to his core to see his own life in that film, and it felt far too much like a betrayal, especially now that he knew the truth. It was Morgan. She had written the screenplay. Once again, a woman claimed to love him and betrayed his secret to his enemies, to everyone, to the world. Apparently it had an equal upsetting effect on the girl, whoever she is. The way she ran out of here. Seraphina locked her black eyes on his. "I'll ask you again, what is she to you, Dante?" "She's an innocent mortal, nothing more." He didn't tell her that. He had been nearby, listening to every word of her conversation with Morgan. He had fully expected to have to intervene. "Oh, she's far more than an ordinary mortal, my love. Far, far more." She took his hand, and they walked side by side along the beach, a mile from where Seraphina had been talking to the girl. "But we'll get to that," she said. "Why did you interrupt me when I was having such a illuminating discussion with the whelp?" "To stop you from ripping out her jugular, dear gentle aunt. She's a local and would be missed." Truth to tell, he'd been following Morgan with half a mind to do just that himself, to destroy her. But when he'd seen his bloodthirsty Seraphina with her, he felt a stab of fear and an undeniable instinct to protect. He had shouted to Seraphina with his mind, and she had responded by rushing to his side, in a blur motion too fast for any human eye to follow. "It goes to show how poorly I've taught you, doesn't it?" she asked, "and how isolated you have made yourself all these years. I couldn't have harmed her if I wanted to. She's one of the chosen." He nodded. "That much I'd put together on my own, but I admit I know very little of just what that meant, aside from the fact that she shares the same antigen we all do, and that she can become as we are." Sighing, Seraphina nodded. "I knew she was in the theater before I'd been there a heartbeat," she said. She stopped walking when she came to a large boulder, took a seat upon it, a queen taking her throne. Dante stood nearby, watching her. As he stared out at the sea, it was a blue-black hue of wet slate. "We can feel their presence, this much you know. We cannot harm them, cannot." He pondered that for a moment. "I thought it was more that we tended not to want to." "What would happen, do you suppose, if we tried?" She glanced up at him quickly. "You have some reason for wanting to do the girl harm?" "I barely know her." He looked away as he said it. Seraphina shrugged delicately. "If we tried, well, I'm not sure what would happen. The truth of the matter is we're more often compelled to protect them than when we encounter them in passing." That explained his urge to come between his aunt and the weeping Morgan. "They have abbreviated lifespans, you know." His head snapped up. Morgan had said as much, but he hadn't wanted to believe it. No, I didn't know that, he lied. Unwilling and unable to let his aunt know how much he and Morgan had communicated in her dream, Seraphina only nodded. Rarely live beyond 30 mortal years. She looks as though she's shivering already. She shrugged. What can be done? He asked, searching Seraphina's face. Nothing. Bring her over or let her die. It's a simple choice, really, she shrugged. They say that for each vampire there is one of the chosen with whom the psychic bond is stronger. I've always found it to be so much hogwash, romanticism, and nothing more. Oh, do you? You're saying your bond with me wasn't like that? My bond with you was nothing like that, Dante. You were my family, my nephew, the only one of my clan with any kind of link to me. I love you because of that. She stared out at the sea, and the wind lifted her curls from her shoulders. No, this other bond, this one that is spoken of in whispers among the undead, is said to be intensely more. It manifests itself as an extreme psychic link between the minds. Some claim a vampire can communicate mentally with their special mortal, and he or she with them. It also creates an extreme sexual hunger between the two that becomes even more heightened should they share blood. She swung her gaze to Dante, and he quickly averted his eyes. Is she living in your house, Dante? He schooled his expression, guarded his thoughts. Yes. Then where are you staying? He did not want her seeing the inside of Morgan's house, he thought. She would realize Morgan was the one writing the stories for the screen. A secret it would be difficult to keep for very long anyway, if Seraphina were to stay in town. But the longer the better. He thought that if anyone could get past the instinctive distaste for harming one of the chosen, it would be Seraphina. And she would, if she knew the truth. She would kill the girl and let the consequences be damned. A cave. Nothing that would suit you, love. She crooked a brow. There is a house for rent only a mile or so from here. Shall we procure it for our use? He nodded vaguely, thinking how very badly he wanted to see Morgan tonight, wondering how the hell he was going to rid himself of Seraphina in the meantime. Then that will be our mission tonight, she said. Tomorrow night we'll see that film again, all of it this time. I must find out who is telling our tales to the filmmakers, and how he got the information. Apparently a native of this place, if the theater marquee is correct. Though likely he'd moved to some glamorous city by now. He, Dante asked, frowning. Morgan, something or other. I'll get the full name tomorrow. She smiled at him. But tonight's that house. It's quite isolated. We can stay there tonight and no one will be the wiser. Dante nodded slowly, thinking as he did. Go ahead of me, he whispered. See about the house. I'll join you by dawn. I have to feed. She crooked her brow at him. The house will be ready. It's a mile north on the road that runs along the coast. A once proud Victorian that has been painted a ghastly yellow, with pink and green trim. He nodded, recalling the exact place she meant. Frankly, I'm surprised you didn't rent it yourself already. Why would he? He had been living beneath the feet of the woman his body craved, and now he knew for certain why he craved her so. But that did nothing to ease the hunger. I require very little in the way of comfort, Fina. Leaning close, she clasped his collar in both hands and kissed him on the mouth. Come before dawn, love, or I'll come looking. I will. She left him. He waited until his senses could no longer detect her anywhere nearby, and then he went to find Morgan. He couldn't play with her anymore. He needed answers now. It was 4 a.m. when Lou's cell phone bleated, jerking him out of what had damn near been a little nap. He'd been sitting in his car all night watching Maxie's place. He thought maybe Lydia was sleeping over because she hadn't left yet, and hell, he didn't blame her if Max was telling her vampire stories in there. He picked up the phone. Yeah, Malone, where the hell are you? He frowned at the familiar voice of his longtime partner. Back when he had the manpower to put 2 cops in every car, Denny. They've been looking everywhere for you, Lou. Listen, you better get over here pronto. Jesus, I'm not due for another. He glanced at his watch. Not the station, your place, Lou. There's been a break-in, and it's not pretty. He frowned, and a tiny sliver of ice jabbed him in the chest. He knew just by Denny's tone that he would get no more than that over the phone, so he didn't bother asking. I'll be right over. If, you've been with anyone tonight, you might just want to bring them along too. Lou blinked, drawing the phone away and staring at it, then bringing it slowly back to his head. Are you suggesting I might need an alibi, Den? Might not be a bad idea. Lou swore softly. What the hell is going on over there? Too late. Sergeant Dennis Kehoe had already disconnected. Someone tapped on Lou's car window, and he damn near jumped out of his skin. It was only Maxie, though, grinning at him and holding a cup of coffee in her hand. He set the phone down, rolled out the window. If you want to spend the whole night watching me, Lou, you could just say so. It's not like I'd object, but it would be more fun if you'd do it from closer range. He stared up at her as she shoved the cup into his hands. So you know I've been here ever since I dropped you off. She shook her head. You left for 20 minutes or so right after, remember? Crap, he did remember. The drive to the station, the phone call to his friend at the CIA. Hell. What's the matter, Lou? He glanced at her and noticed she was still dressed, if you could call it that. She never wore much. Thin, strapped t-shirts and that were tight-fitting with smart-ass remarks across the front, or loose, silky blouses that were even sexier. If it got cold, she tossed a jacket over them. Where's Lydia? He saw her face tighten up just a little. She's sound asleep. Why? Get in, would you? I need to go to my place for a sec. Okay, Lou, fine. She came around the car, got in. You don't look so good. You okay? I'll let you know when we get to my place. As it turned out, it wasn't okay. It wasn't at all okay. He knew that when he pulled up and couldn't even get into the parking lot because of all the police vehicles. Yellow tape crisscrossed every entrance, and an ambulance was just pulling away. What the hell? Lou put a hand on Maxie's shoulder to calm her down, stopped the car, and then got out. You better wait here. I'll come and get you if I need you. She opened the car door and got out, walking so close to him that her thigh and hip seemed to have melted to his, and she wrapped an arm around his and held on tight. Malone, Captain Howard Dutton, Lou's boss, lifted the crime scene tape for Lou to duck underneath. I need to know where you've been all night, all right? He's been with me, Maxie spat out the words before Lou could so much as open his mouth. Who was in the ambulance? The captain blinked, and Lou knew he wasn't used to being questioned by a mite of a thing like Maxine Stewart. She shifted his gaze to Lou's again. You been with this woman all night? No, Lou said. I dropped her off at her place around 10. Left to go to the station to find something I left in my desk. Then I went back. All told, I was gone about 20 minutes. Anyone see where you were during that time? Can you verify that you didn't come back here to the apartment? Lou felt his stomach clench. No. Yes, he can, Captain. Maxine cut in yet again. Both men looked at her sharply. Max shrugged, focusing on Lou. Look, I admit it. I thought you were sneaking off to meet some other woman. Other woman? What the hell was she talking about? So I followed you. I saw you go into the station, and I waited until you came back out. Then I followed you back to my place. And Officer Malone didn't see you, ma'am? I parked in back and went in the back door. He never even knew I'd been gone. She crossed her arms over her chest. Now, will you please tell us what's going on here? Who was in that ambulance? The captain sighed again, addressing Lou and shutting Max out, and Lou knew pissed her off. We responded to a report of a prowler in your building, Lou. When we got here, your apartment door was open, the place was trashed, and there was a woman on the floor. She'd been shot in the head at close range. We found a .22 on the floor nearby, no prints. He turned out Denny's. Where's the weapon? Right here, sir. Denny held up an evidence bag as he hurried closer. Lou got it. Lou looked at it and damn near puked, but tried not to keep his poker face. It's mine. The spare I kept in the closet. I thought it probably was, Captain Dutton said. He turned, leading them forward up the stairs toward the apartment. We're going to need you to look around, see if anything's missing. Lou nodded. He walked right behind the captain. Max still close beside him. What about the woman? Lou asked. Is she dead? They're going through the motions. Dutton replied without looking back. They don't expect her to last the night. Though we figured she'd been lying here for 5 to 6 hours. We never did find any prowler. But one neighbor heard what could have been a gunshot around 10 p.m. She thought it was a car backfiring and wrote it off. The ID in the victim's bag read Jones, Tempest Jones. You know her? Max stopped walking. Lou turned to look at her even while processing the name, which seemed vaguely familiar. When he forgot about it when he saw Max's face, which had gone utterly white, her jaw gaped, worked soundlessly, and her grip on his forearm tightened like a vase. Wide green eyes stared into his moistening, and she whispered, Stormy. Crap, Maxine's best friend. Max damn near went backwards down the stairs when her knees gave. Her hand on his arm went lax, and she sort of sagged, but he grabbed her quickly, pulled her in close, figuring it was okay at a time like this. The captain turned. Then you did know the victim. She's a friend, Lou said. Max's arms had snapped around his waist, and her face was pressed into his shirt. He felt wetness there, but she cried silently. Listen, Captain, can you just secure the place, post a man on it? I need to take Max to the hospital. The captain made a face but nodded. Yeah, sure, fine, but one thing, Lou. How well did you know this girl, this Tempest Jones? He shook his head. Well enough to share donuts and coffee with her. Not well enough so I'd recognize her legal name right off. That good enough for you? The captain sighed and inclined his head. Go on. Thanks. Lou moved Max's body around his own, like shifting positions of a belt. He got her around to the side and managed to shuffle the two of them back down the stairs and pass the tape to the car. Someone opened the passenger door for him, and he glanced up at Denny, gave him a nod of thanks. Denny looked worried and maybe a little surprised. Sure, he looked surprised. It must seem to him, to everyone here, as if he and Mad Maxie were some kind of couple. As if that could happen. He eased her into the passenger seat, and she still clung to him. Hun, you gotta let go now, okay? Just for a minute, so I can drive to the hospital, Sniffling, she nodded against his chest, but it still took long seconds for her to loosen her grip on his neck. He put her seat belt around her, snapped it in place, and closed her door. As soon as he was behind the wheel, she latched onto him again. Head on his shoulder, clutching his arm, made it tough to drive, not that he minded. What the hell happened? She asked as he drove. Why would Stormy go to your place? He licked his lips. I don't know. I just don't freaking know, Max. Then he lowered his head. He didn't like thinking what he was thinking, but all of this happened after he made that phone call to his old friend at the CIA. Stormy Jones was one of the people Max had said had been threatened by that goon 5 years ago. It couldn't be connected, though. Daggone it. Couldn't be. Guesstimation. Let me see how long this chapter is. Try. Chapter 14. Dante did not intend to creep up to her window tonight as he had done in the past. He planned to stride right up the walk to the front door, ring the bell, and introduce himself when she opened it. Yes, it would shock her, but though physically fragile, he sensed she had emotional strength she hadn't yet tapped. She would deal with the shock, and then she would answer him for what she had done. He climbed the sloping ground from the shore into the grassy hilltop, then nearer, crossing the back lawn and circling the house. But when he got close, his skin prickled, not with the attraction he always felt as he drew close to her, but with warning. Alert now, he looked around, seeing the strange vehicle in her driveway. He didn't smell exhaust in the air. It must have been sitting there for at least a short time. Whoever was in the house with Morgan had been waiting for her when she had finally returned to the house. Closing his eyes, Dante attuned his senses. As always, Morgan's essence was clear and easy to locate. The other was far more difficult to perceive. It took effort, almost as if the man, yes, it was a man, had constructed a wall around his mind. There was something about the stranger Dante didn't like. He felt dangerous. Dante went to the house, walked slowly around it, drawing one palm over the wood, and as he stepped around and between the plants and the shrubs. They had not gone into the study. He didn't know why, but he felt like congratulating her on that, and then he did. Without even meaning to, he sent the message. Good thinking, Morgan. He doesn't need to go in there. It stunned him to the marrow when he heard her mind's reply. That room is my special place, mine and Dante's. No one goes in there. She spoke to him and thought she was speaking to herself, carrying on that internal dialogue that people tended to have with themselves, never knowing that one side of the conversation was coming from someone else. I don't like this man, she was thinking. He's dangerous, Dante warned quickly, focusing on what was important. Be careful of him. She knew he knew she was nodding to herself to him, even though he couldn't see her. And then he reached the outer wall of the sitting room and felt the hum of her energy right through the wall. He stopped there, turning to face this side of the house, pressing both palms flat, probing his way deeper into her mind, and still deeper. When he felt resistance, he whispered in her brain, Open to me, Morgan. It's only me. Let me come inside. You know I won't hurt you. And she did. With a shuddering sigh, she relaxed and let him in, all the way in. He found himself seeing through her eyes, hearing with her ears. He didn't take control, wasn't even certain he could if he tried, but it didn't matter. That wasn't the purpose of his being that close to her. Protecting her was, which was odd, considering he had come here furious enough to kill her himself. At least he had convinced himself he was furious enough to do her harm. Now he wondered. The man, the stranger, was standing with his back to Morgan, studying the layout of the house in false admiration, nodding in false approval. Very nice, what you've done with the old place. I like it, she replied. But you said you were here to interview me about my work, Mr. Stiles. Please call me Frank. I realize I should get moving on this. I'd never have bothered you at 4 a.m. if I hadn't seen you coming in. I don't doubt you're tired. It was awful good of you to let me come in at all. Well, you did say you had driven 6 hours to get here in time to meet your deadline, but as I said, it's going to have to be brief. Will you have a seat? She didn't offer him a refreshment. He didn't ask. Instead, he turned as he took a seat in a massive hardwood chair with lion's feet and a velvet cushion. Dante saw his face through Morgan's eyes and felt his heart skip. Or was that Morgan's heart? The left side of the man's face was molted with pink flesh that looked like a melted rubber doll. The eyelid drooped, the cheek sagged, the lips twisted, and the ear was misshapen lump. He wore a hairpiece on that side. Dante hadn't spotted it at first, but now he could see that the hair was slightly different. Shade and a bit less coarse on one side of his head than the other. It was a good job, good enough to fool a mortal. The scarred man smiled at her. To her credit, Morgan smiled back, but she too was sensing something off about the man, and it wasn't due to just his appearance. She kept thinking it might be chiding herself for being nervous because of a scar. The man couldn't help it. But she kept sensing something wrong beyond the surface. You must be very excited about your award nomination, he said. I think it's well deserved. Thank you. Yes, I'm quite overwhelmed that the film has been so well received. It's a good film. He pulled out a notepad from a pocket and then a pen. It looks exactly like the notepad you would expect a reporter to carry, which was another red flag for Dante as Dante was concerned. But then again, so were So were the first two. Why do you think this one was so much more well received? Dante's heart seemed to stop beating. The first two films were much lower budget, Morgan said, but even so, they gained. Great, now my nose is stuffing up. But even so, they gained a cult following that was beyond all our expectations. That, of course, led to our being able to release the third in a much bigger way. The man nodded. Is there a fourth in the works? Of course. The man nodded and scribbled and smiled, while Dante's heart twisted itself into knots. I think the films have realism about them that other vampires, indeed nearly all horror films, tend to lack. The Dante character, he's completely believable, very real. Morgan swallowed uncomfortably. He is real to me, her mind whispered. Aloud she said, well, that's the key to a good fiction. You know, making it believable. Indeed, the reporter said, but this is beyond believable. It's almost as if it's a true story. And when I stumbled on the fact that your home was once owned by a man named Dante, well, I have to admit, I got curious. Every nerve in Morgan's body went taut. What are you talking about, Mr. Styles? Oh, come on, it's a matter of public record. She shook her head slowly. No, she said, it's not. Then she seemed to catch herself. I don't know where you got that information, but it's incorrect. This place was abandoned by its former owner, Mr. Daniel Taylor. The state claimed it when he died without an heir, and my Uncle David bought it from them. Daniel Taylor was one of many aliases the vampire Dante used over the years. She made a face. Dante couldn't see it, but he could feel her twisting her lips and bending her brows, as if she thought the man were speaking of something too stupid to even contemplate. My goodness, you have a big imagination. It's fact, Morgan, just as the things in those films of yours are fact. She got to her feet. You're insane if you're thinking vampires are factual, Mr. Styles, and I don't like entertaining these insane strangers in my house in the dead of night. I think it's time for you to leave, and I think it's time for you to tell the truth. Vampires are real, Miss De Silva. You know it, and I know it. Dante is real, and he's going to be mad as hell when he finds out you've been making major motion pictures out of his deep dark secrets. She strode across the room, even as a cold shiver worked through her body, across the foyer toward the front door. She reached for the handle. The man was close behind her all the way, and he put a hand over hers on the doorknob. I'm not a reporter, he told her. I work for the government. I spent my life studying creatures like Dante, Miss De Silva, and I know enough about them to know that you're in serious danger if he finds you. Get out. She jerked the door open, despite his hand on hers. Now, Styles. How did you learn all that information about him? Tell me. She glared at him. If you don't leave, I'm going to call the police. I'm not going to let you do that. Her hand moved quick as a heartbeat, to the little number panel on the wall, fingers dancing over the security system. Buttons before he could reach to stop her. There. The police will be here in 5 minutes. I'm trying to help you. He's a monster, Miss De Silva. He'll find you, and trust me, he'll kill you unless you let me help. She leaned toward him. There is no such thing as vampires, she whispered. Then she smiled as a siren sounded in the distance. Quicker than I expected. The man sighed in frustration, turned, and ran out of the house, his gait uneven. She saw his car as he drove away and made a note of the license plate quickly before she closed the door, turned in the locks. Then slowly, very slowly, she went still and silent as her mind replayed the words the man had said. The Dante was real. That he would be furious with her for sharing his secrets with the world. That he would kill her. But he couldn't kill her, she thought in an unfocused and vague way. He loved her. No, she corrected herself. She loved him. If he were real, he would love her too, because there was no denying the power of that bond. But he wasn't real. He didn't exist. He didn't love her. And he certainly couldn't hurt her. Closing his senses, Dante retreated from her mind, slowly, feeling his own flesh again. He opened his eyes, blinking his vision into focus. He moved his hands, clenching and releasing his fist a few times. The sirens were getting closer. Styles was long gone now, but the police were on their way. So was the dawn. In a few more hours, and yet he didn't go to Serafina or the house, so she had no doubt made ready and waiting. He didn't go very far at all. He said he was a reporter, Morgan told the police officer who had shown up. The way his siren had wailed, she'd half expected a small cop army to come crashing in on her. Instead, there was just the one fellow, a rather innocuous-looking grandpa type. If he'd had a hair on his head or face, he could have played a convincing Santa. As it was, though, he had only the ready smile, the twinkling eyes, and the belly. His uniform was midnight blue, almost black. He didn't wear a hat, and his head was as shiny and pink as his cheeks. He introduced himself as Sandy Gray, which sounded more like a color than a name, she thought. So you let him in? Sandy said. Did he show you any ID? She shook her head. She and Officer Sandy were standing in the foyer, face to face. He a hair shorter, she feeling less than reassured and more tired by the minute. Do you mind coming in where we can sit down? She asked. Of course not. He followed as she led him through it to the sitting room where the man had been. I went for a long walk today. It made me realize how out of shape I am. It really wiped me out. She sat in her favorite chair. The cop remained standing, and she figured she could understand that. At least he was taller that way. She didn't even mind. You said the man gave you his name, he prompted, drawing her back to the subject. Yes, Stiles, Frank Stiles. It didn't seem like a made-up name at the time. He jotted it down. He had a notepad like yours there, a pen instead of a pencil. He said he'd been waiting for the chance to interview me with the award nomination, and that he'd driven 6 straight hours just to interview me in time for a morning deadline. The man nodded. He knew about the nomination since seeing the theater marquees. Morgan realized that everyone in town knew about it by now. Then what happened? I'm not sure if I can read all this. I'm not going to be able to. I'll pick up where I just left off in the next video because I'm 100% sure I'm not going to be able to finish this. So bye.